It was a Tuesday evening, late October, when the chill began to truly settle into the bones of Blackwood Pass. The sun had long since dipped below the jagged peaks of the Sentinel Mountains, casting the small, isolated town of Oakhaven into an early, deep twilight. At the heart of Oakhaven, the small, unassuming bus depot, little more than a covered lean-to beside the general store, was a beacon of dull yellow light. Inside, a handful of passengers huddled, their breath misting in the cold air. They were waiting for the 10:45 p.m. express, the only reliable connection to the outside world, to the bustling city of Fairview, some 3 hours away. It was a familiar ritual, a mundane journey undertaken by students, workers, and those simply seeking a change of scenery. Tonight, the air held an unusual weight, a subtle hush that seemed to dampen the usual pre-departure chatter. Old Man Hemlock, who ran the depot and practically half the town's small businesses, stoked the potbelly stove, its dim glow reflecting in his spectacles. He looked out at the thickening fog, a grim line set on his weathered face. "Looks like a rough one tonight," he mumbled, more to himself than anyone. The wind had begun to pick up, a low moan through the pines, and the first sparse flakes of snow were starting to dance in the streetlight's halo. The passengers, bundled in thick coats, shifted nervously. They knew the pass. They knew what the mountains could do. But the bus always got through. It always did. Precisely at 10:40 p.m., the headlights cut through the swirling mist. The Oakhaven Express, a standard Greyhound-style coach, rumbled to a stop, its diesel engine exhaling a plume of white vapor into the frigid air. The driver, a quiet man named Thomas Miller, a veteran of the route for over a decade, emerged, his face obscured by the brim of his cap. He exchanged a few hushed words with Hemlock, a brief, serious nod passing between them about the worsening conditions. 10 passengers boarded, their tickets scanned, their luggage stowed. Among them was a young college student heading home for a rare visit, a couple returning from a weekend hiking trip, and a small family with 2 children, quiet and wide-eyed. Each one settling into their seat, perhaps already half asleep, anticipating the rhythmic hum of the road. At 10:46 p.m., a minute behind schedule, the bus pulled away from the depot. Its tail lights glowed like fading embers against the encroaching darkness and the swirling snow. Hemlock watched it go, the sound of the engine fading quickly into the vast silence of the night. He saw it turn onto the main road, the one that led directly into the heart of Blackwood Pass. Then, nothing but the wind and the snow. The last anyone in Oakhaven saw of the Oakhaven Express was its silhouette, momentarily stark against the backdrop of the rising storm, before it was swallowed whole by the night. A few minutes later, the depot phone rang. It was the dispatch from Fairview, confirming the bus had departed. On schedule, Hemlock had reported, the words feeling heavy on his tongue, even then. The Oakhaven Express was due to arrive in Fairview at 1:45 a.m. The night shift dispatcher, a woman named Sarah Jenkins, was used to minor delays, especially when the weather turned. So when 2 a.m. rolled around, then 2:30 a.m., she wasn't immediately concerned. The mountains were treacherous. But by 3 a.m., a cold knot began to tighten in her stomach. She tried Miller's radio, a static-filled silence the only response. She called Oakhaven, rousing Hemlock from a fitful sleep. He confirmed the bus had left as scheduled. No one had seen it turn back. No one had heard anything. No other vehicles had reported any incidents on Blackwood Pass. The snowstorm had intensified throughout the night, making communications difficult, but not impossible. Yet, the bus remained silent. By dawn, a full-scale alert was issued. Local police, state troopers, and mountain rescue teams were mobilized. The Oakhaven Express, with its 10 passengers and veteran driver, had simply vanished. Not a single trace had been left behind. The realization was chilling. How could a vehicle of that size, carrying so many souls, disappear so completely from an established route? The initial assumption was an accident, a slide off the treacherous mountain road, perhaps into a ravine. But the sheer silence, the lack of any distress call, the absence of even a single piece of debris, defied logic. As daylight broke, revealing a landscape blanketed in fresh, deep snow, the search began in earnest. Helicopters, grounded for a time by the blizzard, took to the skies, their powerful spotlights piercing the lingering fog. Ground crews, equipped with snowmobiles and tracking dogs, scoured every inch of the known route through Blackwood Pass. They covered the 80-mile stretch of winding road, checking every hairpin turn, every steep drop-off, every dense thicket of pine and fir. They investigated old logging trails, abandoned mine shafts, even small, forgotten side roads that led to nowhere. Nothing. Not a broken headlight, not a torn piece of fabric, not a single skid mark in the snow. It was as if the bus had simply dematerialized. The snow, falling heavily after the disappearance, had complicated the initial search, burying any potential tracks. But even after the snow had been cleared from the main roads, and the melting began to reveal the ground beneath, there was no sign. Over the next weeks, the search expanded. The nearby rivers and lakes were dredged, sonar equipment sweeping their icy depths. Civilian volunteers joined the efforts, driven by a desperate hope. The entire region surrounding Blackwood Pass was turned upside down, but the mountains held their secrets tight. The silence from the Oakhaven Express was absolute. No one could explain it. The official investigation, bewildered by the total lack of evidence, eventually concluded with no definitive answers. But the questions lingered, festering in the minds of the families and the people of Oakhaven and Fairview. Theories proliferated, each one more unsettling than the last. Some whispered of a massive rockslide, a sudden catastrophic event that buried the bus entirely, deep beneath tons of earth and rock. But even the most powerful geological events leave some surface trace, some telltale scar on the landscape. This part of the pass showed no such recent upheaval. Others spoke of a more sinister possibility, a meticulously planned hijacking. But what would be the motive? The passengers were ordinary people, not high-value targets. And a bus, cumbersome and slow, is hardly an ideal getaway vehicle for a group of abductors in a snowstorm. The sheer logistics seemed impossible. Then there were the stranger tales, the local legends that stirred in the cold mountain air. Whispers of the Shadow Pass, a stretch of road known for unexplained disappearances, for travelers who simply ceased to be. Old Man Hemlock, when pressed, spoke of the mountain having its own will, of ancient forces that guarded its secrets. He spoke of the night the bus vanished, how the air itself felt heavy, almost alive, how the snow seemed to fall in unnatural patterns, almost like a curtain drawing closed. A handful of motorists who had traversed the pass earlier that evening reported unusually thick, disorienting fog, unlike anything they had ever experienced, a fog that seemed to absorb sound and light. One truck driver claimed for a moment he saw a flickering, indistinct light, far off the road, high on a ridge where no road existed, before it too vanished. Years turned into decades. The Oakhaven Express, with its 10 passengers and driver, became a ghost story, a chilling cautionary tale whispered around campfires and in quiet taverns. Memorials were erected, but they offered little solace. The families were left with an agonizing void, a question mark where their loved ones should have been. No bodies, no wreckage, no explanation. Just the stark, brutal fact that a bus full of people had entered the Blackwood Pass one snowy night and simply never emerged. The mountain kept its secrets. To this day, the case remains officially unsolved, a cold file in a forgotten archive. Was it a natural disaster of unimaginable scale, perfectly concealed? Was it an act of human malice, flawlessly executed? Or was there something else at play, something far more ancient and inscrutable, lurking in the silent, snow-draped peaks of the Sentinel Mountains? The Oakhaven Express is still out there somewhere, or perhaps it isn't. And the question remains, hanging heavy in the cold mountain air, echoing through the empty passes. What truly happened on Blackwood Pass that night? And where did they go?